Hello, everybody. Welcome to the online Critical Issues Forum Teachers Workshop. Today, I am delighted to have Dr. Nikolai Sokov, a senior fellow at CNS. He's going to give a lecture on nuclear weapons states and its allies' perspectives on the nuclear weapons ban treaty. As we have already learned from Gohar Muchahanova's lecture, the nuclear weapons ban treaty is a historic achievement, while there are formidable challenges and there are many different perspectives. So it is very important for CIF participants to study different perspectives toward the nuclear ban treaty. So I sent you the outline of today's lecture to help you to understand today's lecture better. So please take a look at the outline. So let me introduce Dr. Sokov briefly. From 1987 to 1992, Dr. Sokov worked at the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of the Soviet Union and later Russia, and participated in START, Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, negotiations, as well as in a number of summit and ministerial meetings. He has been invited to speak at numerous conferences and provide briefings to many organizations, both governmental and non-governmental, and as an international organization. Dr. Nikolai Sokov has a PhD from the University of Michigan. He also graduated from Moscow State University. So Dr. Sokov is the author or co-author of several monographs and book chapters. So today, I am very happy to have Dr. Sokov for this Critical Issues Forum. So now, let me mute myself and I will give the microphone to Dr. Sokov. So now you have a microphone, Nikolai.
Yes. Thank you, Masako. Let me start by welcoming the participants to the CIF. It's a pity that I cannot meet you in person, well, but at least I can share what I think and what I know about the topic. Let us go back to 2013. In 2013, Norway hosted the first conference on the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons. That was a very important international forum that highlighted how destructive, how terrible nuclear weapons are. Because unfortunately, the nuclear weapon states did not participate in that meeting. They did not participate in the second humanitarian impact conference that was held in Mexico, but the United States did decide eventually, like in some of its allies, did eventually participate in the third such conference that was held in Vienna. So what this real story, what that history tells us. Now, nuclear weapon states do share, by and large, do share the view that nuclear weapons are terrible, that nuclear weapons are extremely dangerous for the humankind, that nuclear weapons, well, should never be used. Look, in that sense, I would say that all, at least the official nuclear weapons, and by official, I mean the nuclear weapons states that are listed in the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and that's United States, now Russia, although it was originally the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, France, and China. They do share many views expressed at the humanitarian impact conferences, but they simply do not believe that the world is ready to eliminate nuclear weapons. Yes, and for that reason, they did not support the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, and they were very reluctant to participate in the humanitarian impact conferences. primarily, I would say, because they feared that the humanitarian impact conferences would result in a treaty to ban nuclear weapons. Yes, and that's exactly what happened in the end. The negative attitude of nuclear weapon states, at least the official nuclear states, is extremely well known. In fact, three of them, the United States, France, and the United Kingdom, immediately issued a joint statement saying that they reject that treaty. The reaction of Russia and China was considerably more modest and muted. For some time, they did not speak openly against the treaty, and it was only by the end of September, so really like almost 3 months ago, that Russia for the first time made an official statement speaking against the treaty. Yes, and the first high-level statement by Russia was even a month later. Why they waited? Yes, I would say it was more political than about the substance. Neither Russia nor China really concealed that they share the attitude of the United States, France, and the United Kingdom. They just did not probably want to make it so public and so strongly. But a few months later, it became clear that the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons really will not fly. Well, let's keep in mind that 122 nations supported the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons at the time when negotiations were concluded. 122 states approved of the treaty, but when the treaty was open for signature, only 50, well, in fact, signed it. So yes, really, the treaty, well, clearly does not enjoy the support of the majority of states in the world, and that enabled at least Russia to speak much more publicly about its opposition. So what about the allies of nuclear weapon states? Really, that's allies of the United States first and foremost. That's members of NATO, as well as Japan, South Korea, a few other states. They have very cautious attitude toward nuclear ban for, well, really many of the same reasons. They do believe that they depend on the extended deterrence, nuclear deterrence, that the United States provides, and that should ensure security of these countries. Take, for example, such countries as Norway and Japan. For many, many years, these countries have been really in the forefront of the movement to eliminate nuclear weapons, but they did not support that treaty. They were there in the room, but they did not support it in the end. And really, I can understand them because from the vantage point of professional, that treaty, well, is more of a political statement than really like a treaty that could be implemented. If at some point we decided to really conclude a treaty to ban, eliminate nuclear weapons, we'll need to negotiate a whole new document. That's just a treaty that cannot be implemented in the current form. But this is really important at the moment. The important thing is that nuclear weapon states and their allies do not think that banning on nuclear weapons today or in the near future is advisable. Yes, and it's important to understand why. As I said, um, even these states do not view nuclear weapons as usable. They view them as very terrible. They do believe that nuclear weapons should not be used. But there's a big difference between should not be used and should be eliminated. In the view of nuclear states, well, in fact, many countries and many people in non-nuclear states as well on nuclear weapons by the very fact of their existence do contribute to international stability. The conflict between the proponents of early ban and elimination of nuclear weapons on the one hand, and the states that are reluctant to support that position, first of all, the nuclear weapon states and their allies, should be put in the appropriate perspective. Indeed, it's not on 1950s anymore, and it's useful to keep in mind that the current anti-nuclear movement did originate in 1950s. 1950s was indeed the time when so many states, so many politicians, military experts viewed nuclear weapons as just another bomb. So they did not really see them as special. Even in the 1960s, countries continued to increase nuclear arsenals. Countries continued to develop ever more sophisticated and complex nuclear strategies, and everything. But gradually that all ended. So arguing, telling to nuclear weapon states that nuclear weapons are terrible, well, yes, that's important reminder, but probably does not really convey the right message, in the sense that, well, yes, they already know that. Well, in fact, they know it so well that after the end of the Cold War, the United States and Russia are the two biggest nuclear states, did reduce their nuclear arsenals by 70 to 80%. So a massive, really, reduction. So we're really talking about a few thousand remaining weapons. Yes, that's a lot, but nowhere near what the world actually had 25 years ago. But as we all know, the last step is also the most difficult step. How can we do that? More importantly, what do we need to make elimination of nuclear weapons possible? And really here is the key kind of challenge that we face. Can we simply eliminate nuclear weapons? Will the world be safer if we just eliminate nuclear weapons? We really don't have an answer to that question. Because in many fear, and frankly, as I share that view, is that elimination of nuclear weapons may actually make the world safe for a large-scale conventional war. As you know, tensions in the international system have been growing in the past about 10 years, less. Maybe last 5 to 7 years. Yes, and they have been growing very significantly. I would even argue that the level of tension today between the United States and Russia is actually higher than during the Cold War. Look, in a way, you can say that the danger of a military conflict between the United States and Russia today is higher than it used to be during the Cold War. So yes, it's actually like a very tense situation, and I would say probably the initiative to ban nuclear weapons is simply not really timely. The proponents of that measure really kind of chose probably the worst time possible to negotiate that measure. It's very hard to imagine the United States and Russia to agree to elimination of nuclear weapons all under the present circumstances. But the more general point, it all really boils down to the question, do we really need to change, to reform the international system in order to eliminate nuclear weapons? Yes, and the proponents of the ban say, no, we don't need to change anything. We just need to take out nuclear weapons and the world will be safer. Yes, and the opponents say, no, yes, if we simply remove nuclear weapons, we will have a large-scale conventional war. And we really don't have a very good answer to that choice. Well, we know that, well, World War II was conducted with the help of the weapons that by today's standards are actually very primitive, and still it took 50 million people. How many lives will be lost if we suddenly have a non-nuclear war on a global scale? Yes, I bet it will be many, many more. But really, that's the key question is, and that's the key disagreement between nuclear weapon states and their allies on the one hand, and the proponents of nuclear ban on the other hand. What do we do in the international system? Should we change it, or we can just get rid of nuclear weapons? All the rest is fundamentally not important. Well, I'll just try to look, for example, from the vantage point of Russia on that situation. Last summer, the United States adopted a new round of sanctions. The law that was adopted by Congress lumped together in the same law Russia, North Korea, and Iran. And the only way that can be seen from Moscow is that the United States doesn't tend to change the political regime in Russia. Will they agree to ban nuclear weapons? Well, certainly not. In the United States and increasingly all in Europe, there's a perception that Russia interferes with elections, that it's aggressive, that it's trying to undermine the international system. Yes, that Russia prepares for war. So can you expect the West to abandon nuclear weapons? I suppose not. Then we have the growing kind of confrontation, well, really not yet confrontation, but growing tension between the United States and China. And economically, China is probably already number one in the world, the biggest economy in the world. Yes, or at best, it shares the first place with the United States. It really depends on how you count. Yes, the United States does fear geopolitical challenge from China. So will the United States abandon nuclear weapons? No. So yes, that's really kind of the issues that policymakers, that the expert communities need to grapple with. Once again, the situation in the world is very tense, and yes, of course, nuclear ban is a very noble initiative, but if we're trying to be practical, can we really kind of do that? Can we accept that initiative? Yes, so nuclear weapon states, well, the great powers really are not prepared to do that. One thing that's increasingly high on the agenda of policymakers in nuclear weapon states, I would really more say about the great powers. Well, it's not really important that they are nuclear weapon states, they're great powers. Is the advent of the emergence of advanced conventional weapons. Isn't here, it's really interesting to look at the situation, in the way it develops. Back during the Cold War, by the end of the Cold War, it became increasingly clear that traditional conventional forces are not quite usable in combat. The United States in Vietnam, the Soviet Union in Afghanistan, felt that very acutely. Well, really, if you look at the armed forces of the United States during Vietnam or the Soviet armed forces during Afghanistan, you would see that these are fundamentally the same armed forces that were used during World War II, with simply more advanced weapons and things like that, but fundamentally they were the same. You can say that by the end of the Cold War, by the 80s, foreign policy of major powers could no longer be supported by military power. That was really the first time in human history when you could not continue your foreign policy by means of war, of military power. That was really a unique period. Unfortunately, that period was very short. Already in 1991, the United States used on a significant scale long-range, precision-guided conventional weapons, cruise missiles, and that really opened a whole new stage in the concept of the use of conventional forces. Once again, you could use military power in support of your foreign policy. I would say an even more visible demonstration of how relevant, how important are the advanced conventional weapons is the war in the Balkans in 1999, when Serbia had to simply sit there and accept strikes without being able to respond. So the traditional conventional forces that Serbia had really were no match to advanced conventional forces that were used by the United States and its allies. And just keep in mind that for 25 years, the monopoly on such weapons was really held by the United States and its allies. To that development of Russia, and to a smaller extent China, but first of all Russia responded with enhanced reliance on nuclear weapons. So that was kind of like a logical, you might say, development. Yes, if you cannot respond to conventional forces with conventional forces, you rely on nuclear weapons, simply because, yes, they're so terrible, that they should never be used. So any threat to use nuclear weapons would actually uh, 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 would be like able to deter aggression. Yes, and that continued until 2015. In 2015, Russia demonstrated for the first time that it also has long-range, precision-guided conventional weapons, cruise missiles. Yes, it used them in Syria. That event showed two things. One, that Russia is catching up with the West in terms of non-nuclear conventional capability. Yes, and second, it also showed that, like the United States, Moscow is prepared to use military power in support of foreign policy. So that really changed the entire international game. Now, look, obviously, what we saw in 2015 and subsequent years, it's really been just 2 years that we've seen that, not that long over time. That's not yet the full capacities, and Russia will need at least another 5-7 years to develop full capacity. Okay, but we know that, well, the process is going on. Yes, and we've also heard recently from the Chief of General Staff of Russia that in the future, Moscow does plan to reduce reliance on nuclear weapons. Yes, and really, kind of these two developments in the United States and Russia demonstrate the biggest kind of contradiction of the campaign to ban nuclear weapons. Yes, the United States radically reduced reliance on nuclear weapons back in 1990s. But that happened because the United States now had usable weapons, conventional weapons, all look extremely powerful, but more importantly, very usable. Yes, and let me remind you once again that nuclear weapons are not usable. They're so terrible, no one really wants to use them, right? But conventional weapons, even extremely even extremely potent ones still can be used. So we did not see the reduction of military capability in the United States. We simply saw that nuclear weapons are replaced by usable weapons, right? Yes, and now we are beginning to see the same process like in Russia. They plan to reduce reliance on nuclear weapons just because they got a more usable capability. Yes, I would say, yes, you can say that, oh yes, wonderful, we can eliminate nuclear weapons, yes, and we'll simply have other weapons in their place. I don't really think that's a very good idea. Like as I mentioned, very primitive weapons during World War II resulted in 50 million casualties. Now we have very advanced weapons. So yes, that's not a very good idea. Yes, and once again, I don't really believe that we can afford eliminating nuclear weapons if the price is really just more capable and more usable weapons. We're just opening really the gates for the use of force internationally among the great powers. So these are very, very serious implications. Yes, quite obviously, when you have this situation emerging, that great powers will soon have advanced conventional capabilities. In China and India are following Russia very, very closely. Yes, maybe you need something really terrible to prevent them from fighting. But let us look at non-nuclear states. Well, in fact, let us look at non-nuclear states that are not even allies of nuclear states. There are many that have pretty good reasons to fear that military power can be used against them. And we saw, yes, countries like Serbia, like Iraq, like Libya. Yes, and you really can continue kind of the list. Quite a few countries in the world have political regimes that are not accepted in the world. Yes, and these regimes do have very good reasons to fear that force can be used against them. So what do? Yes, unfortunately, as we've seen, on the example of North Korea, they may actually think about acquiring nuclear weapons. I would say that Iran probably belongs to that case too. For some time, it really thought that it needed nuclear weapons to deter the use of military power against itself. That was true under the George W. Bush administration and Ahmadinejad government in Iran. Things changed under Obama administration. Yes, and there were negotiations, and a truly historic actually deal was reached to make sure that Iran does not acquire nuclear weapons. But at least at some point, I do believe there was an intention in Iran to seriously consider going nuclear. North Korea actually did that. So what's the problem there? Is once again we return to the issue of conventional weapons. You see, nuclear weapons are no longer advanced. Nuclear weapons really represent the technology that belongs to 1960s. And a lot of countries now have that technology or can develop that technology. It's really the matter of costs. Yes, it's still quite expensive. Yes, it's a matter of the risks. Quite obviously, when you try to acquire nuclear weapons, you become a target. Yes, and we've seen that. You risk becoming like an outsider. In the international system, you'll be isolated, you will be sanctioned and everything. But technology itself is so accessible nowadays. That's all technology. In contrast to advanced conventional weapons, very few countries in the world can now possess advanced conventional weapons, the usable weapons. So you might actually say that nuclear weapons are now the choice of the states that don't have enough money and they're not sufficiently advanced technologically. It's quite a paradoxical actually situation, and few people have thought about that. But nuclear weapons are old technology and the technology that's available to many. So what can we do in this situation? Non-nuclear states, some of them, I would say actually very few of them, but nonetheless, there are states in the world that may, out of fear that force will be used against them, may consider going nuclear. Yes, and certainly such states will not support the nuclear ban treaty or just the movement to nuclear ban. It's a matter of their security. For some of them, well, they see nuclear weapons like as a matter of survival. Yes, and what can be more tangible for policymakers? Well, just imagine that situation that that key nuclear weapon states like United States, Russia, China, United Kingdom, France, India agreed to nuclear ban. So, that would still actually leave North Korea out there. Can you imagine that North Korea would voluntarily agree to eliminate its nuclear weapons? I doubt that. So something should actually be probably done about the international system. Once again, the number of states that might decide to proliferate is very, very small, really just very few states. But they do matter because nuclear ban should be universal. You cannot have just one or two states keeping nuclear weapons. That's impossible. That cannot happen. Such a thing as nuclear ban should be supported and implemented by all states in the world without exception. And we're just not yet there. So all these kind of things do work against nuclear ban. These considerations remain on the minds of policymakers. Yet, moreover, there is now a concern that instead of supporting the nuclear ban, the United States begins nuclear modernization. Well, at least you can see that in statements by many NGOs, international NGOs and national NGOs that support nuclear ban. So let us actually think about that. That's really more like of a technical actually choice, but unfortunately people who advocate nuclear ban do not always seriously consider the purely technical of the engineering side of things. Yes. So if you're on nuclear weapon state, well, you need to have nuclear weapons, right? That comes by definition, and also the delivery means, the missiles, bombers, submarines, things like that can deliver these nuclear weapons. That's what it's really all about, being a nuclear weapon state. All these things, both the weapons and delivery systems, cannot exist forever. The United States really built the current arsenal back in the 80s. Yes, and it's old. The missiles, the submarines, to a more limited extent bombers, cannot survive forever. Yes, you can repair them, you can maintain them, but that cannot continue forever. Components are no longer produced. The technology is ancient. So from time to time, what happens quite rarely, every maybe like 25, 30, 40 even years, you need to do a replacement of whole classes of delivery vehicles. Yes, and Russia is actually is doing this right now. Simply because Russia inherited the Soviet arsenal when the Soviet Union fell apart 25 years ago, but Russia can no longer even maintain easily the Soviet-made weapons because some components were produced, or even some missiles were produced outside the Russian territory. So yes, the Russians did have to engage in the replacement process fairly quickly. So they started really in the last decade. Now the United States is entering the same stage, the same process. And that's something that should be kept in mind. Even if you, for example, decide today that, I don't know, like in 20 years, nuclear weapons will be eliminated, you will still need to keep the production capability. You still need to maintain both the weapons and the delivery vehicles in working state. So you still will do things that are often classified as an arms race. Yes, and that's just like an engineering need. Now, yes, I do not say that I support everything that U.S. government is doing. Some elements of that program do add on new capacity. For example, the new gravity bomb, B-6112, that yes, and many of them will be deployed in Europe. Does have new capability. Well, it will be possibly more actually usable, more actually dangerous. So yes, I do not support that, for example. But overall, you'll still need to engage in like an expensive, yes, and very complex process of replacing delivery vehicles and weapons. Yes, and that will be classified by the proponents of nuclear ban as an arms race, even though, yeah, so it's just a matter really of all engineering requirements. Right now, the United States really faces a very simple choice. Yes, it has to engage in a very expensive and lengthy program to replace its nuclear arsenal, or become a non-nuclear state very soon, maybe like in 5 to 7 years. Yes, and I have already explained why the United States government will not accept non-nuclear status right now. Yes, that's regarded as very dangerous. But if you do not go non-nuclear in the next several years, well, you'll need to engage in an expensive replacement program. Same is true for Russia. Yes, it started the replacement program last decade. That program is now now is in full swing. All the money has been spent. Well, on not all, but the bulk of money has already been spent. Can you expect the Russian government suddenly say, "Oh yeah, it doesn't really matter what we spent. Let's just go non-nuclear"? Right? Well, hardly. So these are also very practical, more like engineering actual choices that you need to make. Yes, and I would say, yes, I cannot imagine from the purely technical even point of view, great powers agreeing to go non-nuclear sooner than maybe like 30 years from now. Yes, it's just really hard to imagine. So, yes, these are things that need to be taken into account. These are things that are on the mind of policymakers. Yes, and we need to pay attention to what policymakers think. Yes, nuclear weapons are a global phenomenon. Yes, nuclear weapons are the threat to the entire world, but decisions are made nationally. by each country separately. Yes, and you need to somehow deal with that issue. You need to talk to each country separately. You need to understand the perspective of each country separately, and you need find ways to influence their governments, and that's not easy, especially not in the current international situation, in the current tension. Now, let me conclude by a slightly more optimistic note. Yes, I do believe that nuclear weapons should be eliminated. In that sense, I share the goals of the nuclear ban movement. Yes, I just don't think that the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons is the right instrument. Yes, I don't think that it's timely. But at the same time, I do not share the views of those who say, oh, nuclear weapons will exist forever. Yes, there are many people who, like in the United States and Russia, who say, oh, we need to change the international system so profoundly that it can never be achieved, so nuclear weapons will always be with us. No, I don't think so. Yes, I think it's actually very doable to eliminate nuclear weapons. It's much more complicated, it's much more challenging than just a statement, yes, or like a mass movement. Okay, but it's still doable. What, in my view, should be done to achieve that goal? We certainly do not need to create an ideal, a perfect international system that's completely harmonious. Yes, and maybe we'll actually be never able to achieve complete harmony. No, that's fine. We actually don't need that. But we can enhance the role of international law, and we can enhance the role of international organizations and generally make the international system less conflictual. We were actually very close to that situation about 30 years ago. The last years of the Cold War and the first years after the Cold War were like a truly actually unique period when the international system was not harmonious, but countries did try to solve differences through negotiations, through international law, through like regular procedures. And they were much less predisposed to use power. As I mentioned, the war in Iraq in 1991. Yes, that was the war, the first war where the United States used advanced conventional weapons, but it's also worth actually recalling that war was supported by the international community at large. Many thought that war would be like almost the last war ever. Yeah, we'll just deal with that one situation, yes, and things will be stable then. So I would say that in late 80s, early 90s, the world came very close to the situation when we could seriously think about the elimination of nuclear weapons. Yes, I remember that time very well. Yes, at that time, I worked at the foreign ministry as I dealt with nuclear arms control and disarmament. Yes, and I thought, great, we just concluded a few treaties, but in the future, that process will accelerate. I was wrong. The humankind did miss that opportunity, and we allowed the international situation to deteriorate. Oh, that's sad. But looking back, like 25, 30 years, ago, we can say with certainty that it's actually very feasible to create international conditions that would make nuclear disarmament possible. We've been there once, we did not succeed, but that only means that next time when we'll arrive at a similar situation, we should be wary of our past failure, yes, and take care that we do not repeat that failure, that next time we succeed. So once again, we do have this actually positive experience that we can look at, yes, and be certain that elimination of nuclear weapons is feasible. The second thing that we need to address is the advanced conventional weapons about which I just talked so much during my presentation. Yes, I'm very concerned about the advanced conventional capability, primarily because it's very usable, primarily because it can be used in a large-scale war or in a small-scale war. It creates the temptation to use force. Yes, and when you have this opportunity to use force, you do not want to negotiate, right? Why follow international law? Why go to international organizations? Why negotiate if you can simply send a few hundred cruise missiles, right? So we do need to take care of the risk of conventional war. So we do need to develop arms control measures to address the advanced conventional capability, the warfighting capability. There are many ways to do that. Yes, and I'm very certain that it's doable. We can achieve that. Unfortunately, at the moment, no one really seriously thinks about such negotiations. The United States and its allies are mentally still, like in that past period when they had the monopoly. Yes, and Russia now says, we finally got this wonderful military capabilities, and why should we negotiate it away? So let's build more. So right now, I would say, the more developed countries are so fascinated with advanced conventional weapons that they don't want to think about somehow limiting them. But that's an important condition to ensure international stability and to create conditions to eliminate nuclear weapons. So once again, these things are all challenging. It's not easy to achieve the two conditions: a more kind of stable, more organized international system. Well, certainly far from ideal, far from harmonious, but just more organized and more stable. And then the second condition is arms control for advanced conventional weapons. We can do that. We can do that. Yes, and if we do that, I would say that elimination of nuclear weapons will not be all that challenging. Yes, in the end, it's not the nuclear weapons themselves that are the challenge. The biggest challenge is the conditions that favor keeping nuclear weapons, yes, and relying on them for security. Yes, if we can make nuclear weapons unnecessary, then we can certainly eliminate them. But unfortunately, that situation, that future is still ahead of us. The situation today is very tense, so we need to work on the international system, on the international situation, on the tensions that we see today, to create conditions to eliminate nuclear weapons. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nikolai. I'm glad that you ended a somewhat positive note. I was a little bit getting worried, but your lecture is actually what really needed to hear. It really gives us how difficult it is and how challenging it is. So we have so many things to tackle. So just for those who are watching the videos, I would like to facilitate just a little bit of discussion for the sake of, just to stimulate our thoughts. So to be honest, I also don't have I learned a lot from your lecture, and I don't have a, answer. Of course, no one has an answer, but you, in your final statement, you said it's important to create condition so that we can reduce nuclear weapons, also eliminate. At the same time, I often hear that ban treaty advocates often say that this disarmament process, this ban treaty process would contribute to create the condition, better condition. So what would you think about such opinion? Like a disarmament process would contribute to the creating a better international conditions.
Yeah, I just don't agree. The ban treaty was really just about banning, eliminating nuclear weapons. Basically, the proponents of that treaty say that the only bad thing in the world today are nuclear weapons. If somehow we just remove nuclear weapons from the world, then it will be just wonderful life there. It will be so harmonious, yes, and people will no longer be enemies. Yes, to some extent, of course, the presence of nuclear weapons does generate like all the military planning, like and everything. But I would say that more importantly, well, it's more about our relations among states. Yes, I already mentioned that in my view, tensions between the United States and Russia today are actually significantly more serious than even during the Cold War. But let me assure you that nuclear weapons play no role in these tensions. None. The tensions between the United States, and Russia, were caused by a lot of factors, but nuclear weapons are not among them. So if you just remove nuclear weapons, what you have? You got the same level of tensions. But now you no longer have actually fear of war. So yes, and that's really my concern. Unfortunately, humans are not perfect. Yes, it's not the fear of just war itself, but the fear of the most terrible weapon that has been created by humankind, yes, and that's really nuclear weapons. That's a very primal fear. That's very basic fear, but unfortunately now it can contribute to avoiding large-scale war. Yes, it's a pity. But that's how things are. Nuclear weapons are kept not because anyone really wants to freely use them, but they're primarily kept so that their terrible nature makes everyone extremely reluctant to go to war. Yes, truly cannot see how a nuclear ban can improve the international situation. Well, I think that's just like an obsession with nuclear weapons themselves, and trying to shut out, kind of to forget about everything else and to forget about all the challenges that the world faces. Yes, I do not like nuclear weapons. They're really terrible. Yes, I would like to see them like eliminated. Yes, I simply see many more things happening like in the world beyond the presence of nuclear weapons.
Okay, thank you, Nikolai. I really appreciate your answers, and I know there are so many different views. So I'm also wondering, I am not sure, since the division is so deep, and ban treaty advocates and ban treaty opponents are having a very different views. But I guess ban treaty advocates to some extent understand why nuclear weapons are so opposed to this treaty. On the other hand, I'm also wondering, do you think nuclear weapon states, most of the, at least NPT nuclear weapon states, are fully aware of the degree of frustration by the non-nuclear weapon states, like of course different perspectives, or just they don't care what they think? What do you think about the nuclear weapon states, the view toward non-nuclear weapon stated frustration?
Well, it really differs a lot from one person to another. No, of course they are aware. So what? You already said that, yes, implications of nuclear weapons are global, but decisions are made nationally. Yes, and yes, and you say, well, I'm very sorry, but I'll understand that you're so frustrated, but there are serious reasons why I cannot agree with your point of view. Okay, sorry. That's basically it. Yes, you can be frustrated, but well, it doesn't really mean that you will unnecessarily just abandon your own point of view and try to do like anything to make others actually happy, especially if you do not think that they're right. You think they're wrong, so will you really kind of accept their point of view? No. And so let's also keep in mind, once again, I gave you the figures. 122 states voted for the final text of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Yes, but when it was open for signature, only 50 signed. So yes, I would actually doubt the statement that the entire international community, except for a small group of states, actually supports that treaty. Yes, I mentioned Norway, I mentioned Japan. These two states have always been in the forefront of the movement to eliminate nuclear weapons. Well, it's really hard to find two states that have been more active, that applied political impulse, that funded a lot of anti-nuclear and non-nuclear work, that supported arms control and everything. But they did not sign that treaty, yes, and they did not even support the treaty. So, yes, I would say that yeah, I would actually be very reluctant to equate the global movement to eliminate nuclear weapons with the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. Yes, I would say that the treaty has significantly less support than the idea of nuclear disarmament. Yes, it's not just the best really treaty, simply, you know, like on technical or diplomatic actually grounds, or on professional kind of grounds. It's not a very good treaty. I'm sorry. Yes, I don't really think that people who wrote the text and who kind of gave it the final shape really know much about discernment. That's all.
Okay.
Yes, and I have this really big concern. Is actually, look, I'm really glad that you raised this. Is I have this concern, and many have this concern about how the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons is gonna affect the treaties that we already have. Well, Article 6 of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, right? That's the article that contains the obligation to eliminate nuclear weapons. The Nuclear Ban Treaty de facto replaces that article. So, well, it's no longer sufficient to support Article 6. They say, no, that's a bad article. It has not been implemented. So let's have a whole different actually treaty all put in its place. Yeah, wonderful. But if you strike Article 6 of the NPT, then you undermine the entire Non-Proliferation Treaty. Then you undermine arms control treaties that do exist. The INF, the START, other kind of things. So you kind of no longer care about like everything that's been done past like 60 years. Yes, and yes, and you place just this one imperfect treaty in the place. Yes, and that's how you judge everything. Yes, I think it's actually very dangerous. There is a risk that the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons might actually undermine everything that we've already achieved.
Okay, thank you. Again, I appreciate your view and thank you. But I also heard many countries who participated in the negotiation supported NPT, and they kept telling that NPT remain the cornerstone of a nuclear non-proliferation regime. So to be honest, I don't know if ban treaty is going to jeopardize existing non-proliferation treaty. I don't know, and I really can't tell. So it's difficult. So it's really obvious. There are so many very different views. You mentioned Japan and Norway, especially as someone from Japan. I know Japan really wants to be a bridge builder. However, at this point, it's looks almost impossible to make a bridge.
Yep.
Yeah. However, having said that, do you think if Japan create, or not only Japan, if there's an opportunity for nuclear weapon states to also talk to non-nuclear weapon states in the context of this treaty, or maybe bigger disarmament agenda, do you think nuclear weapon states could at least come to some discussion or negotiations to listen to other parties or talk to other parties? I think it's important to, at least it's important to start something somewhere to bridge, to make
yes.
a bridge.
You understand what you say. No, I agree with you. Well, see, the problem. So yes, you said that some states that participated in negotiations to support the NPT, yes, they've made such statements, but it's not what they'll intend, yes, and not what they say. They have, they can have the best of intentions, but how it really works, like in real world, it's a whole different matter. So yes, you may want but fail. Yes, so far, actually, yes, I would say yes. The Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons does not enjoy as massive support, as wide scale support as its authors and proponents hoped for. And that's actually good. Like in the sense that it cannot really hurt too much. It's about being the bridge. Yes, absolutely. Japan has always played a very important role as a bridge between nuclear and non-nuclear states. As I said, that's like it's very important to talk, to understand each other's points of view. Yes, and Japan has been doing that, and I hope it will continue doing that in the future. That's a very important role. That's a very central role. I would say that in the near future, maybe next several years, that probably will not work. We are in a very deep crisis right now. I mean, the international system is in a very deep crisis. In the next several years, no one will even think about nuclear disarmament. Even reduction of nuclear weapons is really not feasible, like in the next few years. I hope that the current crisis will not last long. And I hope that, like it happened back in the 80s, the current crisis will actually make people think more, will make people actually use their brain. That would be great. Yes, and we might actually arrive at the same situation that we saw 30 years ago, they said, when we had a very good chance to eliminate nuclear weapons. So I do really hope that things will get back on the right track, and that Japan is able to continue doing this very important job. My concern about the bridge is that, well, it's very hard to build a bridge between nuclear weapon states and the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Because the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons does not presume any dialogue. Why talk? You got the text. Yes. And you must accept the text that we got. Yes. If you do not accept the text, then you're bad. That's all. So one kind of a fundamental methodological kind of problem with having this treaty is that, well, it really stops like any kind of dialogue. You got two completely different points of view. So you must accept the treaty. No, we don't. Yes, and it's very hard to build a bridge between these two kind of points of view, because both points of view do not really assume any dialogue. So, you don't need a bridge. It's either or. That's it. Yes, once again, I'm really glad that that treaty does not enjoy as massive support as some hoped for. So you can still have a lot of states that are prepared to talk. So yeah, I just hope this treaty will kind of pass. Yes, it was like extremely noble intention. Yes, I fully share the sentiment, I fully share the concern, but I think the attempt was not good. I'm sorry about that. I know that Gauhar said it was an historic achievement. I do not think it's an historic achievement. I think it does more harm than benefit. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you,
and
Nick.
by the way, yes, once again, just let me remind you that I do favor nuclear disarmament. So yes, I'm not really speaking like as someone who supports nuclear weapons. No, I don't support them. I think they should be eliminated, but I think that particular attempt was not sufficiently well thought through. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Nikolai. Yeah, for the record, Dr. Sokov is for the nuclear disarmament. And also, he did say that nuclear weapons should be eliminated. Just different approaches. And this is really
I have not just been saying that, all right?
Right.
Unlike many people out there in the world, yes, I actually did participate in negotiations, and I spent like a number of years actually achieving a very deep reduction of nuclear weapons. So I did some very practical actual work on that. So I would say, yes, I have a very good record on that.
Okay, so thank you so much. And now, I hope all the students, I guess now you have many thoughts, and this really gives you a great opportunity to have a conversation with your classmates or teachers. And this is the whole reason of this project. We really want to stimulate discussion, and we really want you to come up with your own solution. So let's continue this debate, and because this is the most important, one of the most important topics in the world. And I'm so glad that high school students are taking this issue so seriously. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Sokov, and we really enjoyed your lecture. Thank you.
Let me maybe make one final comment here.
Oh, sure, of course, please.
Yes, and it's not about nuclear weapons. There are two main conditions to be responsible citizens on the world. One is knowledge. You do need to know facts. The facts of history, the facts of politics, physics, engineering, so on and so forth. You do need knowledge to make good choices. Yes, and the second condition is you need to think. That's very important, and I think CIF is particularly valuable in that respect, that it gives you the opportunity to think by asking you difficult questions. You cannot just simply think, have like imagination, have proposals if you do not know facts. So, such proposals will be like empty and useless. You cannot simply have knowledge if you do not think. Then you just become like a library, like a heap of knowledge of no use. So you need to have both. On knowledge and facts, yes, and that will make you responsible citizens of the world. That will help you to achieve better things for the entire humankind.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, with that very important note, I would like to conclude this lecture. Thank you so much for participating in this lecture, and also thank you for watching this video. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.